Alright, no over-the-top intros or fake dramatics this time, we're gonna cut straight to the point. After keeping my eyes on it for years, reading bits and pieces over time, watching some of the anime, and seeing this trailer for a movie a few years back, I have finally sat down and read all 37 volumes of Gantz. Bought every one of the Dark Horse omnibuses that's out at the time of this video's release. I read Gantz G and all of the available chapters of E, as well as watching the 2004 anime, some of the live-action movies, and of course, Zero. The past few months of my life have been an endless sea of edgy CG, and now that I'm on the other side at the end of all things with my brain fully turned to mush from the intense ride I just got off of, I think I can firmly say with 100% absolute certainty that Gantz fucking rules, bro. So, Gantz, or Gantz depending on how you want to pronounce it, is a manga that began in June of 2000, running for 37 volumes weekly all the way until June of 2013 in the magazine Weekly Young Jump, one of the 8 billion magazines Shueisha has under their never-ending umbrella. The series having sold well over 20 million volumes in its lifetime and planning itself as an international hit. Like I implied a minute ago, it's had anime, multiple movies, both live action and CG, light novels, video games, spin-off mangas, and as of 2021, a supposed Hollywood movie on schedule, but we'll talk more about that later. It's a series that well before I started going harder on getting into manga around 2012, I had heard about from people online for a few various reasons. The art was supposed to be insane, the action was supposed to be top tier, and the mystery of the story and the violent directions it took were supposed to be unlike anything else out there. And in those same conversations, I'd hear that it was edgy gutter trash garbage, that the story was mean and cruel for no reason, that not a single character was enjoyable, the ending was absolute unredeemable dog shit, and that the art was phoned in due to the use of CGI, which at the time was one of the only hyper-popular manga that had boldly used CG in its chapters consistently. So for years, the impression I had of Gantz before reading it myself was, sounds cool, but probably a bit too edgy. I'll read it offhand one day when I have nothing else to do and just kind of see for myself. Well, smash cut to 10 years later and I'm doing an hour-and-a-half video on why Gantz is one of the dopest series I've ever enjoyed, major flaws and all. So before we get more into what makes it something unlike anything else and how it's divided its fans more than Twitter SMT heads arguing between Personas 3, 4, and 5, let's talk first about the dude behind the manga, one Hiroya Oku. So from reading Gantz first before doing any research on who Oku was or what he was like, you get a very distinct impression of him through his storytelling. And that's one of, damn, I bet this dude is either super intense and a bit offbeat, or the most basic boring chill guy ever who just happens to think of some dank shit. And guess what, fucking ding ding, it's the second one. Based on every interview I've watched and read, the afterwords and extra info pages in Gantz detailing his work processes and general thoughts, and also his super active Twitter account where he's posting almost daily, he's one of the most dude-ass dudes I've ever seen. Also, based on that Twitter account, he will be the first big-name manga artist to make an AI-generated manga, but that's a discussion for another day. From the constant references in his works to action movies, the giant-ass figure collection that seems to be mostly action movie stars, from his own mouth himself, he's just a guy who enjoys watching movies and being surprised by what's coming next. His favorite movie actually being Die Hard, which when you look at Gantz overall, the story of survival against insane odds, yeah, that makes sense. He's someone who enjoys making what he does because it's just manga of him being himself, regardless of any worry or restraint by modern manga conventions. There's actually a side chapter in Gantz that's an autobiographical look into Oku's thoughts about manga creation and how when he was younger, he ended up watching Back to the Future for the first time, and how that exposure to this over-the-top, unpredictable sci-fi adventure at a young age, where he himself could identify with Marty McFly as a character and wanted to see how he could get out of this crazy past-future banging his mom mess. It had opened Oku's eyes to the value of storytelling and how being totally surprised by what came next was such a fun and unique feeling that he wanted to create himself. From the references in his manga and him just outright listing movies that he loves in post-volume writings, the dude is born and bred on straight up cinema. And with that in mind, and short stories like Red and Black aside, he's made 6 different series that all literally feel like him just writing what he likes, what he finds interesting, and making them all extremely unique and outright odd at times, but always so outlandishly surprising and unpredictable. Before Gantz had begun, Oku had released 2 other manga series, one titled Hen and the other one called 01. Now, Hen was a 21-volume manga that, in all honesty, is a bit rough. The first 13 volumes of the series focus in on 2 male leads, Suzuki and Sato, the 2 developing feelings for each other and falling in love, with Suzuki being straight and unable to accept he may want to get down with this cute-ass dude. And after that, the final 8 volumes switch gears to focus on a Yuri relationship between a hypersexual bitchy lead girl and the small quiet new girl in town. The lead girl unable to accept that she may be gay and crushing on this mousy new girl, just like the previous story. The first 13 volumes at the time of this video were still mostly untranslated and have no way to read them in English, but the last 8 are online out there for you to read. And after reading those 8 volumes that I could, I walked out going, okay. Like, no lies to tell, despite the romance lasting 8 volumes, it feels like it doesn't really go anywhere and kind of gets lost in itself towards the end before just stopping. The thing I felt was most interesting though, was the raw and unrefined artwork by Oku. This being his first major series, it was also one of the first times his art was really on display, and it's a bit weird. Character proportions are just wrong, faces all have extremely blank expressions and look too similar to each other, and it just seems amateur overall. But there's something about it I find super interesting and memorable. Like, the minute-to-minute art is very plain, but some of the shots and the covers, like the overall aesthetical details, really kept me hooked all the way till its lackluster finish. It honestly felt like, despite it very much not being one, Oku wanted to make a shoujo manga both in art and in story, something he himself has said about Hen in the past, even if the shoujo story aspects fell totally flat. It's kind of like the manga PPPPPPP or whatever that was recently cancelled in Jump, which is still bullshit by the way, where I would see pretty consistent criticism of its art, and while I could even agree at times, there was just something unique and interesting to it, where it felt like it was unrestricted from normal traditions and had a style totally unique to itself. And that's kind of the same feeling I got from Hen, except it was art that was still just in a growing phase. A growing phase that didn't end with the next series either, that being 01. So I'm definitely not the first person on YouTube to say this in their Gantz video, and I probably won't be the last. But while 01 is extremely important to the process that would eventually create Gantz, and while I do think it is totally worth talking about, just like most of those other people online, I gotta agree, yeah, 01 is kinda bad. Following a kid named Nero who one day while at an arcade, his sister gets thwacked in the face by some dipshit kid's guitar case, the dipshit refusing to apologize and beating Nero's ass for complaining about it. Then later, that same kid transferring into Nero's school and continuing his dipshittery, it all leading into the boys becoming rivals in a new virtual reality game that's become a massive craze, it being titled MBZ, which stands for Maximum Battle Zone. And it's with MBZ that everything about 01, its strengths and weaknesses really start to show. So I mentioned it earlier, but one of the things Hiroya Oku is known best for is his total nonchalant use of CGI in his manga. While it being way more subtle and less of a focus in Hen, it was over here with 01 where Oku and his team would go hard and attempt to use CGI to fully create a manga. The VR battles of the story using 100% CG assets mixed with drawings, and at times even going completely digital for a few pages. And as you can obviously see here, it didn't really work. This ultimately was a manga being made in the 90s, and despite his honestly really forward thinking on his use of the medium, the tools were just completely not ready yet. And it didn't mesh well at all with the still amateur hand-drawn art that Oku himself was creating. I mean shit, as someone born in the 90s and grew up watching things from both back then and the early 2000s, the world of CG was a rough one that took a really long time to get down. Not everything could look like Reboot, sometimes you gotta Code Lyoko. Man, I don't care, I fucking loved Code Lyoko. Now in 2023, CGI in manga has come a long way and tons of artists make use of it. One super recent example being Inio Asano, the creator of tons of banger manga, most famously Goodnight Pun Pun, with him starting his new series Mujina of the Deep, where its first chapter is mostly just one long fight scene. Him later posting on Twitter the direct one-to-one pages that were made first using Unreal Engine 5, and then later redrawn and done in his style and detail. And honestly, in my opinion, this shit fucking rules, dude. Tech that makes it easier for artists to go wilder and bigger in their art, using it as a tool for growth and not just a straight replacement, is always a huge plus in my opinion. And with that, I really do respect the early effort in 01, but the tech and honestly Oku himself just weren't there yet. Him actually admitting years down the line that it wasn't the best series, and despite his honest effort to continue making the manga using the CG tools would have literally bankrupted him. You gotta remember, manga artists only have their own personal tools to work with. No magazine was gonna fund this manga back then. So all of the CGI came from Oku's pocket, and in the 90s, that shit wasn't cheap. Now on the flip side of all this, the thing I did notice in 01 that stood out to me was the groundwork for Gantz, both in the extremely methodical detail to the actual tools and tech relating to MBZ, and also the callous way people treated each other outside of the game. Sure, the VR combat itself in the manga was kind of bad, but these shots specifically of Nero getting into the machine have a raw Oku sci-fi energy, and it mixes the tech with reality in a really cool way, and feels like a believable simulation machine just by its first introduction alone. And when Nero isn't in this future tech battle orb, he's instead dealing with these awful people in his day-to-day life. The way characters act and react all seeming so incredibly on edge and full of a hateful malice, kind of making it hard to enjoy anyone in this story at all. Both of these were traits that, despite not working out here, would go on to help make Oku's next series something completely unforgettable. A series whose premise he had been working out in his head since high school based on his childhood memories of watching Hisatsu Shigotonen, a really badass looking 1970s to 80s drama about assassins with sick powers that, honestly, looking at it, tons of things are based on this, but that's a whole different convo and enough beating around the bush anyway. It's finally time to talk about Gantz and its first couple of chapters. Gantz follows the story of main character Kei Korono, an unlikable, smarmy, apathetic, and narcissistic piece of shit who lives somewhere around Tokyo. The first time he's properly introduced into the story, a tiny and frail old lady asks him for directions at the train station, and he thinks to himself, man, this old bitch is annoying, I'm just gonna straight lie to her ass, and tells her the completely wrong info. Then when she says, wait a minute, hang on, that isn't right, is it? He zones the fuck in like a Kumadu in a Masatsu and says, listen yo bitch, if you rely on everyone else forever, you're an idiot and I'll kick your ass, basically. And then continues on with his day. Following that, he sees a homeless man fall onto the train tracks he's waiting in front of and thinks, psh, what a dummy, maybe I'll see a dead body, that'll be raw. So based on these first few pages, you can tell Kei sure is a winner. But while watching the drunk homeless dude squirm as a train is on its way, a taller, burly dude jumps down into the tracks to try and help the guy out. His own weight and strength not being enough to lift him off the tracks and having to resort to begging the growing crowd watching for help. To which of course no one does. Kei, our main character who's just been watching the whole time, realizes that this dude is his old friend from grade school, Kato. And when it clicks that an old friend of his could actually be in real danger here, our main character tries to avoid making eye contact because fuck that, he ain't helping. Of course, their eyes meet, prompting Kato to remember his former buddy and yell out for help, causing Kei to unwillingly and almost against his own brain's judgment, spring into action and help lift the homeless guy to safety. And they do it, hell yeah. But now they're on the tracks and a train is about 2 seconds away. So with a big kabam and a decapitated head, our main character and his former friend are dead with their bodies totally wrecked from the crash. R.I.P. Except, within a blink of an eye as the train smacked their backs, they are now standing in an apartment room filled with other people, and a large black sphere resting in the center of the group. As one would probably normally say after all this, Kei thinks to himself, the fuck just happened? Where am I? Who are you people? With tons of other thoughts racing through his head. And me skipping ahead just a bit, this black orb in the center of the room begins to sing a good morning school anthem, and the monitor on the front lighting up to display this message. Your lives have ended. What you do with your new life is entirely up to me. That's the way the cookie crumbles. It then displaying what looks like a deformed kid and calling him the Onion Alien, as well as some of its likes, dislikes, and a favorite phrase. The sides of the sphere pop open, revealing its insides were full of futuristic looking guns and label named suitcases to match each of the people in the room with goofy nicknames like Tits or Yakuza's A and B. Inside every case being an all black tight bodysuit that serves as the uniform for this game. And after that, the transfer begins. A bright beam of light emitting from the sphere and relocating each person to their playing field on a molecular level. The transfer itself taking them somewhere random in Tokyo, their target located close by for them to find and eliminate. And from there, the story of Gantz races off from simple elimination games where battles are a matter of survival against pure unknown, our characters forced to fight and survive over and over at the total mercy of this all-black strange orb, with another death in this game meaning their actual death this time, all the way to an all-out, over-the-top Michael Bay Hollywood action movie that has everything from alien invasions, giant robots, sick future bikes, extremely dramatic romance and love between characters, the nature of humanity and God itself, and honestly, one of the most satisfying and realistic character growths I've ever seen, all coming from the main piece of shit himself, Kei Kurono. So before we start talking about the finer points of Gantz and all of the big spoilers, the things that make it more than just a bombastic ride, and as well as the things that has earned it endless criticism online, let's first talk about the things that most people honestly know Gantz for. That of course being its absolutely insane artwork, and hand in hand with that art, its non-stop brutal and minute-to-minute action. So coming off of 0-1, it's super clear in the first few chapters of Gantz how much Oku had learned from the past mistakes of using his CGI. Whereas in 0-1, it was used to make large, poorly textured chunks of the backgrounds, wonky characters themselves in the games, and just general effects on the page. But here in Gantz, its use was way more subtle at first, while still being in there from chapter 1 all the way to the finish. And while you could probably pick out a couple of background details in those first couple of pages, the first actual in-your-face use of it was the Gantz sphere, it being this almost otherworldly black ball that operates on its own rules. The suits the teams wear, the guns they all use, all of their tech, it's all rendered in this thick black shading that clashes with the traditional drawing style in a super unique way. It feeling like the tools our characters fight with are something weird, something not normal, not exactly human, which honestly just fits this life or death game they've all been thrown into even more, killing fucked up alien monsters they don't understand with odd looking guns and suits that make no sense. And it's in that exact otherworldly factor where I think Oku's use of CGI in Gantz was not only improved and much more stylish, but it ended up adding a whole different layer of alien feeling to the creatures of Gantz. Unknowable monsters that were usually made from the use of CGI, them imitating human concepts or ideas to seemingly try and blend in, to appear human, but also at other times while still imitating those exact concepts, just looking like complete and absolute horrors that do not belong in our world. Things that feel like they're trying to seem like they fit in but just fucking don't. Our human cast in them creating a weird duality of humanity and the unknown. Now, this isn't to say that the series is just cool CG and nothing else, in fact, it's a bit of the opposite. While the CGI is wildly improved and makes the overall experience just get better as it goes, the destruction and scale always rising and filling double-page spreads throughout the series run, the heart of the manga is almost always displayed in the traditional hand-drawn art that Oku creates for his characters. Now at first there was a slight misconception at the beginning of Gantz where readers basically thought that the whole manga was CGI, characters included, but Oku himself noted that while the background assets are made with CG and they do model renders in them to place where that character will be in the frame, later down the line when time comes, Oku draws all of the characters themselves, their body language, their motion, their faces and hair, that's all him. And going back to Hin, where I mentioned his initial style had rough proportions and blank expressions, early Gantz definitely has that in small doses as well. Character designs have a lot of beady eyes and some same face between certain people, but before too long in, those were traits that were completely wiped away, with characters' bodies becoming much more realistically unique to their stature and their movements seeming so natural, the motions while running away from a fucked up monster giving off a sense of actual desperation, like the character is legit scrambling and scraping for their life, the expressions in their faces growing past the basic beginnings and going to look totally full of emotion. If someone is angry, sad, wired up, or confused, it's all shown clearly and without words. Fuck, you don't need words half the time in Gantz because the art is speaking so loudly for itself, and somehow in the middle of all of the violence, it's become just visually stunning and unique in its own ways. A perfect blend of artist and CG to make the insane calamity all feel so human and real. And one thing its art is yelling out to the heavens is goddamn, Oku is a horny dude. Out of the 383 total chapters, I'd say like 250 to 300 of them open up with what's referred to as the Gantz girls. Chapters week to week starting with a page featuring a cute girl scantily wearing a Gantz suit, posing around or on the tools that are used in the game, almost always with tits and ass out. And out of all of these girls that are used, like only basically a small few of them are ever actually in the story at all. Them just being up in front here because, well, Oku wanted to draw them. Mad respect honestly, there's some really ace designs in here. The use of CGI throughout the series brings the alien uncanny valley unknowable monsters to a whole new level of terrifying. And Oku's constantly growing skill as an artist himself lets these characters come into their own as they go, as they fight and live past each round and struggle in their daily normal lives to try and coexist with this hellish new reality they live in. And across each night of the game and all of the actual battles themselves, they're filled with a ruthless brutality that is taken out on the Gantz teams over and over. New cast members appearing and developing slightly before just being ripped down and crushed. Them completely erased from the plot and filling each remaining character with a desperate need for survival. Desperation that is shown off non-stop through how wild and realistic the actual combat is from the first mission all the way up until its explosive conclusion. The battles in Gantz are, at least in my experience, what the fans of the series usually talk about most when they recommend the manga. And for good reason, because they fucking rule. The series itself honestly mostly spent in combat as the games can last dozens of chapters at a time. The legendary Osaka arc taking place all in one non-stop over-the-top night where a literal war in the Dotonbori streets breaks out between Gantz teams. Them fighting monsters together for over 50 chapters, 5 whole volumes of survival from non-stop waves of enemies who just keep getting stronger and so much more terrifying. The players fight with a standard but future tech looking set of weapons that just defy basic explanation, referred to as the X and Y guns. The cast having to figure out how to fight with them as they go and what exactly they even do. The X weapons range between pistols and rifles that fire a delayed invisible wave, which after a few seconds causes a massive implosion that just kinda disintegrates anything in its radius, whether it's concrete or something's head. And then you have the Y gun that has a capture function which launches hyper tough wires to wrap around an enemy and transport them out of the area, pretty much in the same manner that the players are transported in, it counting as a kill basically. But honestly, they aren't really used a lot because usually people are just too busy trying to kill the big ass monster in front of them as quick as possible or else it's game over. There is also, of course, the super tough extendable katanas that can cut down seemingly anything and create sick ass battles between cool ass looking dudes. You grab one of these and you basically just become Genichimaru like shit rules. Despite the weapons being hella sick cyberpunk guns, the actual monsters are still extremely tough and relentless in how strong their attacks can be on normal people. And with that is where one of the biggest trademarks of the series comes in, that being the all-black skin-tight Gantz suits that the main cast wear through their battles. These suits, outside of just looking super cool in my opinion, are the actual life-saving linchpins of the players, in letting them be able to resist insane amounts of damage and protect the user from death. The person wearing it able to flex up and strengthen the suit to box toe-to-toe with some of these enemies they fight. The user can punch harder, jump higher, they're bigger, faster, stronger too, basically becoming a real-ass warrior that stands any form of chance in these battles. That is, until the suit runs out of juice and this black goopy mess starts to pour out of the holes, basically letting the user know, it's on now buddy, one hit and you donezo. All of the former functions now failing and it just becoming a piece of spandex clothing. No matter how strong you may be, how resourceful and competent in a fight you think you are, as soon as that suit's drained and its power is gone, you're just a human standing up to a hurricane, an unnatural disaster that wants you wiped out. That exact reason is why these fights have to be so desperate and why they end with such finality. Because one single slip means you're fucking mulched and there's no second chances, or third chances technically I guess. With that said now, like I've alluded to this whole time, these battles are seemingly just games. When you win and do good, you get awarded points. How many monsters you killed, how crucial to the team you were, the cast is always being graded. And after each mission ends and the subsequent points are given out, once a player reaches 100 total, they are given 3 options. The first one being, you get a sick ass new gun, the gun in question being the H or Z gun depending on who you ask. A heavy duty Z-shaped cannon that blasts an immense amount of force straight down on whatever it's targeting in a perfect circle, creating indentions in the ground full of blood. Get 100 points a second time and want an even bigger gun? Pick it again and who knows, you may get a Willmobile that looks like the It bike from South Park, sick ass arm-bladed exoskeletons, or hell, even some robotic armor you can use to box out some fucked up giant monsters if you're just having fun and want to keep playing the game. But past that are the other 2 options, and with those 2, I want to talk about the actual heart of Gantz itself. So, I'm sure it's no secret by now from both the art I've been showing and the things you probably already know from online. While Gantz is over the top in its art and action, it's also very over the top with the amount of extremely edgy and sometimes just very uncomfortable content in it. Outside of the just outright mean violence the series can sometimes have during its combat, characters you just met consistently dying in new and horrible ways, the surrounding things that make up the world and the people in it are just as dark and almost always portrayed with a sense of hopelessness and anger. Kurono being treated like shit by everyone in his real life from the start of the story, and it never really backing down, with he himself, like I had mentioned, also just being a total asshole as a response. And it's a feeling that stretches almost to every single character in the story in some way, like society itself is just on the edge of a breaking point. And lastly, the final card Oku plays quite a lot in the series, the outright neck-scratching, collar-tugging, and I guess if I had to pick a word, tasteless use of extremely edgy content to make the story seem just a bit more hardcore. Now, like, there's the list of things I could bring up. Countless sexual assaults, the blackface mass shooting, multiple school massacres, the Osaka team and other Gantz teams in general towards the end. The fun itself the story seems to be having with the deaths of innocent people. Like, Oku goes out of his way to include things that on one hand are just outright bad and edgy for the sake of being edgy, but in my opinion, also using these things to help portray the overall darkness of humanity and our innate nature, and how Kei grows to overcome the awful person he was turned into by this world, later on guiding the planet to safety during the full Phase 3 scale invasion that's been slowly building up the entire series. I totally understand a lot of the criticism online, and there's tons of things in the series that I just can't defend, like, Azumi's blackface shooting is so wild and out of nowhere, I can't believe it was really that cut and dry and almost never referenced again. And there's like no reason it had to be blackface, it's not like Azumi was trying to become a Canadian politician. And while I think Oku is trying to use these things to serve a greater narrative purpose, I can't blame people at all who get turned off by this, but like I said, I do think all these things are written to push a need for change in Kei, as the world around him is slowly just becoming worse and he actually has the ability to maybe do something about it, to fight back against the shitty ways of other people. When Kei enters the first few games of Gantz, he's selfish, brooding, and unlikable. It feels like he doesn't deserve to be the main character, and like Kato is who you should root for instead. After all, he's an upstanding dude with a little brother at home to protect from their abusive, shitty family. His and Kei's perspective rivaling each other's on the fact that they have to keep playing these games. Kei starting to like it more and more, and Kato both hating and fearing it. That is, until Kei watches them all die, his old friend Kato included, him being the only survivor at the end of the first 6 volumes. So eventually, by process of elimination, Kei becomes the one guy who's lived longer than the new players coming in. He's the closest thing to a leader these people have, the only thing you could call a hero in this world. Because of that, these teammates in turn rely on him over and over, valuing Kei as a leader and as a person. Him in turn actually finding self-worth in playing the game and helping keep his team alive, laying in bed wishing he could just go back to the game because at least there, he's considered a hero when people actually like him. That hero status eventually turning him into the only person the world can rely on. And the reason Kei begins to find that growth in himself is born both from his desperate need of survival, but also one of the previously mentioned 2 options for winning 100 Gantz points. One option, like I'd said, was a sick new gun, with the next actually being to wipe your mind of Gantz and all of the aliens you've killed. Reborn into your normal life with the memories of the day before you died just like nothing had happened at all. Total freedom. And the third and final, spending your hard-earned 100 points to use Gantz databanks to revive someone else who's died in the game, with you both continuing to play for another 100 points each. So despite suffering a first death in your actual life and then a second in the battles, if someone on your team decides to be a cool guy and use their 100 points, you can be brought back a third time and begin the game again for your next chance at 100 points. And with this option is where I want to talk about Kei and the plot itself, which of course means full spoilers from this point forward, so if you'd rather skip that, you can go to this time here because we still got anime, movies, and spin-offs and shit to talk about. The plot of Gantz is spread out over what Oku has referred to as 3 phases. The first phase, dubbed the Missions Arc, actually covers a bulk of the series, lasting from chapter 1 all the way until 237, the series itself only having 383 total chapters. The mission phase is what gave Gantz the legendary status it has online, it mainly consisting of exactly what the name says on the fucking box, missions. Across these 200 plus chapters, Corona was sent on 7 separate target runs with the rest of the Gantz players, fighting increasingly tougher and just outright weirder aliens, the scale of the battle and level of destruction to the world around them growing in each round. In Gantz, the battles take place in the streets of the world, there is no special game zone. The only real thing separating the players from a normal reality being the fact that 1, regular people walking around can't seem to see either the players or the aliens, them just grooving down the street when the wall next to them explodes or they're killed by some unseen attack. And the other thing being a loud beeping sound that rings in the heads of the players as they continue to walk out of the area where the aliens are. It picking up more and more until pop, there goes your fucking head, effectively trapping all players in a game zone until either the enemy is defeated and you get the point scoring, or the timer on Gantz itself runs out. It then warping the players back to safety in that case, but wiping all of their earned points so far back down to 0. After learning the rules of Gantz and watching his teammates die over and over in each new round, Kei's frantic attempts at survival become something a bit different. Him no longer fighting to just stay alive, but instead fighting to live. A straight out refusal to go out like this. His life may suck ass, but here in the game, as he survived round after round, he's become someone for new players to look at and respect since he's the most experienced one here. So he begins to almost enjoy this role in his new life. He's the leader of a group that depends on him. He's found some kind of self-worth in fighting and killing these aliens. And he becomes much more confident and headstrong, willing to stand up to some of the shit life throws in his face finally. A confidence that gets shaken pretty hard to the back half of Phase 1, with the introduction of Kojima and Izumi. So around midways into the first phase, outside of the Gantz games and in Kurono's daily life, one day straight up like a 90s high school movie, he loses a bet and has to ask out someone who's kind of considered the ugly girl in school named Kojima. People constantly being outright straight up mean and dismissive towards her. Following the rules of the bet, Kurono awkwardly asks her out and they begin to date, much to the actual distaste of Kei himself having to be around a girl that he doesn't think is hot. I haven't gone too deep into it so far, but from the first few chapters on, Kei's relationships with women are, not great. The first one he gets close to, Kei Kishimoto, asks to be his pet so she can stay at his house, admittedly only using him for a place to sleep, sure, but he goes way too hard, way too much on her for, checking the notes here, not wanting to fuck, before completely running her back out into homelessness. The next girl, who despite me liking her design and personality a lot actually, she's 100% based on Angelina Jolie's Lara Croft, just barely exists in the story for like 5 minutes before Kei tries to bang her because he's still so mad about the last girl, to which she actually agrees, and then dies later in the mission. So when a third girl comes in, this Tay who's already the butt of a joke right from the beginning, you kinda immediately think, ah shit, here we go again, and expect Kei to be a dick and fuck this up somehow. Except, he notices the small things she does, her specific mannerisms and awkwardness, the way she legitimately values and comes to love Kei for who he is. Him realizing that he's actually found a person who loves him and that he loves in return. A thing that's actually worth living and fighting for in this new life that he lives. Side note, but I fucking love Tay, dude. She's the textbook example of a best girl if there ever was one. She's adorable, caring, and would do anything for anyone. Just a good human who's the best. 10 out of 10, Kei scored the bag. It really seems like Kurono's life, the endless fighting from Gantz aside, and that little dude who tore the school up not counting, is honestly turning for the better. That is, until Izumi also appears in his school, him being a former Gantz player who's cleared and left the game once and now wanting to re-enter the battles because, well, the dude just misses it. Using both the earlier mentioned blackface shooting and kidnapping of Tay to repopulate the player count of Gantz, and to just fuck with Kei. Him shooting and killing Izumi, which is just giving him exactly what he wanted the whole time as a way to return to Gantz. And them starting the next round where they fight dinosaurs. This of course would lead into what is one of my favorite parts of Gantz, with the appearance of the vampires, the Osaka arc, and what would be the very short Phase 2 into the catastrophic arc that is Phase 3. So, in my opinion, the vampires are the first time there's really a massive shakeup in Gantz's plot. You can totally count a few deaths and events as mixing things up in unexpected ways around the plot, but after the dinosaur survival mission where the crew is just barely alive and standing from the last onslaught, a group of badass looking dudes in suits just walks right up to them, able to see both the players and the aliens unlike any regular person has before. And they just form weapons from their bodies, cutting down multiple members of the Gantz teams before they can transport out, leaving the remaining members to wonder who the fuck was that and what was their beef? The vampires themselves not being a part of Gantz, so that means they must exist in our world. Oh, and one of them is Chiaki Kuriyama, the actress who played that badass girl with the ball and chain in Kill Bill 1, you know the one, who once also dressed in a suit like the vampires to interview Oku, and he thought it was so dope that he made her a character. And on the outside of the games, not only were these vampires growing in number, them even recruiting Kei's brother Akira, who vanishes from the story so fast he's not even really worth mentioning anymore. anymore, but there are now also just psychics who are able to levitate shit and blow up people's insides with their mind powers. Some of the team members actually learning these powers and using them in combat against the aliens. And in the middle of these new reveals and wild twists, Gantz selects Tay as the target for the next round, causing a divide between the team as Azumi and some of the other members want to try and kill Tay to get the points, leaving Kei in a mad dash to protect her and, unfortunately, being just totally outmanned and overpowered. Azumi himself cutting down Tay in Kei's arms. The world of Gantz was already weird. I mean, this whole thing is a post-death battle against aliens using future tech. But these things begin to shift into, okay, so between aliens, psychics, and vampires, what the actual fuck is going on in this world? Now the aliens aren't the only threat. Dudes who have nanomachines and fangs like they're fucking Vamp Metal Gear Solid are coming after the cast and attacking them in real life. The characters now having no real form of downtime anymore, having to stay on guard in case an army of suit dicks show up to have sick-ass sword fights. Fights that unfortunately our main cast just can't keep up with. The vampires eventually cornering and killing Kei himself, removing the actual protagonist from the story for an entire arc, the Osaka arc I've already mentioned. This series of events, watching Kei struggle so hard to keep Tay alive as these enemies and eventually Gantz itself begins to target her, him failing to protect her and losing the things he's fought so hard to save. The absolute desperation in the next round as he cleaves his way to 100 points so he can revive her. His fellow team members loving and respecting him so much to use their points to revive Tay, Kato, and Nishi. Kei finally saving her and getting to use his points to actually exit the game, only for their brains to be wiped of the last few months, filling them both with weird emotions that they can't really explain, trying to recall memories that just don't exist anymore, until they finally get that release of remembering and being together again, just for Kei to be cut down and removed from the story by the vampires. The game of Gantz and the story itself just continuing without him, and man, it was an emotional roller coaster that it gripped me from page to page. Watching Kei come so far from being the asshole he was to wanting to see him strive and thrive with his dope-ass girl, and these team members who he's become actual comrades with, only to see it all torn apart over and over so harshly. It really went to show how far Kei and Oku himself had grown and was finding the confidence that was hooking more and more readers. By this point, you wanted to see Kei save the town, get the crown, and Tay crabs, but god damn it, it just won't work out. Oku literally teasing you along the entire way and making every other page an unpredictable turn of events. Him cashing in and creating that exact feeling he gets from movies that he loves so much. There's this scene in volume 19 during Kei's memory wipe where the old man from the game, Suzuki, who is just a really cool dude, I fucking love this guy, just a good person and a good friend to Kurono who loves his wife and helps out anyone around him, but he approaches him in the subway and asks for directions. Kei responds and tells him where to go, smiles and moves on. An obvious comparison, but think about chapter 1 Kei telling that old lady to fuck off, and my boy has come a long way, even if it's unfortunately ended in his death. Then the Osaka arc happens where the team is sent to Dotonbori and an army of yokai led by these boss-ass fuckers begin to destroy the town, which is baller as shit and is honestly better said reading than showing and telling. Like, I could show you pick after pick of wordless wild action, the Osaka team being the scuzziest dipshits possible, and how massive the scale of battle and destruction gets, but it's just much better being seen than told, so yeah. That arc ending with the revival of Kei and the end of phase 2 leading into phase 3, which is where things get astronomical in scale. So as the Osaka arc ends and the surviving team members are awarded their points, Kei is revived into the story, twice technically, but I'll come back to that. And as the next phase officially starts, we are finally given the first few concrete glimpses at any kind of explanation to the Gantz balls and what this entire battle is for. It being revealed by a journalist who's been snooping around in the background that there seem to be locations all over the world with factories producing the Gantz orbs, them all being funded by a mysterious German dude who claims his disabled daughter there, who just seems to lay in bed and say random numbers, told him through those numbers to build the tech and prepare for an alien invasion. The translator who's been conveying all this info to the reporter starting to question him about God and what that conceptual being means before doing some odd shit. Going back to the main cast, they're shown on the Gantz sphere that a timer has appeared, and by using logical reasoning, assume that when that timer runs down, the end of the world will begin, a so-called catastrophe to end all of humanity. And at the same time, all around the world, the Gantz battles have become so massive and insane that they are no longer being hidden at all from regular people. Them able to see the invisible wars that have just been happening all around them the entire series and now having to run for their lives because the scale and destruction of the battles just won't stop growing. It finally reaching its peak with a full-scale alien invasion of Earth on some real-ass Independence Day level shit. The aliens using giant mechs and battle suits to invade countries to both capture and slaughter humanity. Kay and the Gantz members being the only people in the world who have the tools and ability to fight back, to maybe save Earth from the coming destruction. The catastrophe with a K that's been alluded to half the series and in Nishi's online website diary, now fully coming to bring humanity to its knees. And from this point to the end, the story shifts to a full-scale alien war with Kay and the teams infiltrating the massive otherworldly ship to try and defeat the aliens and save captured humans. And by this point, as a reader, you're kind of like, well, goddamn. All of these developments happen within about 30 chapters. The final arc and over-the-top devastation starting like instantly and never slowing down for even a second. Oku cranking up the double-page spreads to fill almost entire volumes, with the scale growing and getting so much more desperate by the minute. Right up until its final chapter, which, just like the rest of Gantz, has insanely fast pacing. I do really fucking love the invasion and how it develops Kay as a character even further, beginning his one-man and also ET girl quest to take the alien city down. Reika, a character who I haven't really mentioned yet because despite her not being that bad at all, I don't hate her or anything. She just is kind of basic and hasn't really done too much in the main plot herself. But she had fallen hard in love with Kay over the course of their missions together and couldn't accept that he loved Tay and not her. So she uses her 100 points to have Gantz make another Kay, even though Kay already exists again now, basically making two main characters. I thought this was super interesting, and it's something that I've wondered about this whole series. K number 1 died at the start, like hard, hit by a train, but was remade and fixed here in the game as a second K. So is that still the same K as the one who died? Is this a new person technically? And with his second death and second revival, even more so, are you the same you as before? Are you the same you as you were before? And now with Reika K's point choice, a whole fourth K exists. Surely that has to create some kind of ethical issues, right? Conflicts with the nature of their existence, shit like that. And nah, K4 debates it for a bit and confronts K3 with the news. Number 3 literally going, bro, I don't give a shit, hell yeah dude, go be with Reika, that rules. I'm not switching, lord no, I have Tay, I'm all good. Y'all be safe though. Which basically forces K4 to kind of accept his new reality and just get over it, effectively becoming a second main character. Oku using this trick to literally have a K saves Tay plot as she's been taken by the alien invaders, as well as a K versus the alien army plot with a brand new crew of badasses sent to take the mothership down. The squad featuring Kato, Kaze, Reika, multiple cool hot looking swordsmen, and George Clooney. Weird and kind of lazy writing? Maybe, but I thought it was really smart honestly. You literally get 2 plots for the price of 1. 2 plots that run back to back as humanity struggles to survive against this alien invasion, revealing basically this whole scenario had been expected to happen by that German company, the same ones behind the production of the Gantz orbs, and that they were the ones hosting the games and sending out the tech to prepare warriors for this inevitable invasion. Some of the leading bigwigs making an appearance to force the Gantz teams all over the world into a counterattack on the alien ship, and just kinda being huge assholes about the whole ordeal. This leads to chapter after chapter of desperate survival on the alien ship. the humans being tiny in size compared to the towering invaders, us being seen almost like bugs to them, the Gantz leaders using massive mechs to assault the ship and cause huge explosive battles in the streets. Well, the streets of the ship itself, it's got like a space matter converter, and the inside seems infinitely long and vast in scale, especially when compared to the actual size of the ship in orbit. So basically an entire civilization of aliens just live in the ship, buildings and all. Pretty cool, honestly. The alien city itself is really fun, and seeing our heroes the size of ants just wandering around, some in wild televised battles with freak-ass CGI monsters that make like no physical sense, and the others just trying to find any escape from the city like it's fucking Sonic Adventure 2. There's also this banging ass dudes rock ass moment where all the bros piss in the alien abduction river that I have nowhere else to slide in. It just had me like, yeah, my fucking dudes, my guys, this shit rules, just guys being dudes, ain't nothing else like it. And after chapters of fighting against insane odds and giant creatures that see humans as playthings, some aliens keeping us as pets and some just straight up gouging out the insides, dunking in their coffee and enjoying us like a light snack, the two Ks come to their separate crossroads. K number 3 having finally found Tay with the help of an alien who went against their species to help these two out. And after one more teleport split up scare, which by this point was just fucking hilarious how many times K and Tay had been reunited just to be split up. Like after this one, I was just laughing out loud, I couldn't help it. But after reuniting one more time, the couple finally escapes back to Earth with some of the humans K was able to rescue. Them ready to just go be somewhere together as it all falls down. And Reika's K number 4 leading the remaining badass squad to finish off the alien menace. And it's right around here where a lot of the complaints about Gantz comes from, with these two character arcs having super sudden conclusions that just feel weird. Reika's K and crew, minus Reika herself because she died in an honestly pretty sad way to save Kurono and the gang, and now that the Gantz orbs themselves have shut down and the dudes controlling them wiped out, there's no more revival, so she's gone. The rest having finally arrived at what's described as the end of the line, one final Gantz orb that will take them to the truth. And upon transporting through the orb, they encounter, this thing. It having all of these different faces of famous historical people and also characters from the story. Something that causes all of the Gantz players' watching's eyes to start bleeding from just gazing at it. A thing I guess you could honestly refer to as humanity's god, seeing as how it knows any and everything. A being from another world where life and the soul itself mean nothing to it. Also revealing it was the being that sent the information involving the Gantz orbs and the alien invasion to humanity in the first place. That German girl I mentioned earlier actually being the code-talking interpreter, and different alien immigrants had been living on Earth for years, them being the actual targets of those early missions, with this final alien race being the most advanced of them all. The humans basically meeting God, shout out in thanks and praise for arming them with the tools to fight back, before getting shut the fuck down and told off by this thing, calling them all arrogant fools that deserve the fate that they've been dealt. It then reminds them how this struggle was pointless anyway and how humanity as a concept is dumb, that their god doesn't actually exist, and of course this is all being said by the faces of people like Abraham Lincoln, Beethoven, Michael Jackson, Einstein, Hitler, and Stephen Hawking. And despite Kei and Kato giving their best heartfelt speeches praising the value of human life, and how the people they've come to know were all valuable and special to them, the being literally revives former cast members as the exact people they were before death. Specifically Reika, the old man, Kei Kishimoto, and Lara Croft, memory intact and everything, just to prove that life itself is that easy to create for a being like it. And then immediately killing them to remind them just as well how easy it can be for that life to be taken away. And then exploding Reika K number 4 into bits, totally removing one half of the two main characters. Oh, and it just casually drops that reincarnation is in fact super real, and even if these people died, their souls will probably be back in the future, just hard confirming what happens to humans after their death. But who cares anyways, that's it, get the fuck out, you'll never see me again. The alien being sending the rest of the team back outside of the room. And that's kind of it for Kato and most of that part of the cast. The rest of their time being spent just trying to escape the ship. It was brief and ended in sadness, but K number 4 getting the chance to tell Reika he loved her after the way things were left earlier was really nice. Even if this whole relationship was kind of fucked and against the laws of humanity, at least here during the end, the love was mutually understood between them. And meanwhile, some badass alien arbitrarily decided K was his greatest target and most hated human because K number 3, aka TK, murked his random brother like 80 chapters ago and claims on worldwide broadcast that he will crash this whole ship into the earth unless K comes up and fights him.
Maiden Schmooky. Hear me, Schmaiden?
And K, having spent this whole story trying to force himself to actually care about others, is now being asked by all of humanity itself to save them. The same people who have literally shit on him the entire story. The same family who never wanted him around in the first place. The same humans who literally had just fallen for obvious alien propaganda and declared K and the Gantz teams terrorists. 4chan, Reddit, and everyone else combined, all of humanity's faith lies in Corono. The people of the world literally all chanting his name and cheering him on. And after spending over 300 chapters growing as a person, the same shitty guy from the start who was hard to enjoy for multiple volumes, finally saving Tay, returning to Earth and being asked to fight one more time, actually wants to help. He goes up to the ship and along with those extra remaining badasses from earlier, whips alien dude shit along with Kato, fully becoming the hero he was meant to be, the hero that Kato had seen in him ever since they were kids who would never stop fighting no matter the odds, blowing a big ass hole in the side of dude's dome and saving the entire human race, literally becoming a global hero since it was all being broadcast live to every nation in the world. They crash back down to Earth's oceans and float for 3 days while contemplating if it all was really just pointless, before washing up to shore, K hugging his girl and Kato hugging his brother. And the story literally bum rushes the fuck out of the magazine, it ending with such an abruptness that caused me to just bust out laughing, like Oku literally yelled, "It's over, bye!" and jumped out the fucking window running. Gantz's 37 volume run stopping in an instant. And as I've said, people were a little pissed. So with this super abrupt final chapter, the entire finale of Gantz ended up feeling just a bit off. Surviving characters don't get any kind of a send-off. The dual plot lines both ended with matter-of-fact conclusions back to back. And there's like no form of post-ending resolution. No 10 years later, no and then so are heroes, like none of that. It's just over and done as soon as feet touch the ground. And while I do totally agree that the abruptness and overall lack of resolution to tons of things feels weird, I also kind of fucking love it. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a rough ending that explains some things and others just gives up on. Remember the vampires I spent a whole chunk on? They just vanished from the story once the invasion began. Why did they declare themselves to be the enemies of the Gantz players? Who decided they were supposed to kill each other? Same with the psychics, never getting any hard explanations. They just had powers and this guy was super fucking OP with them. It's implied that parasites or nanomachines are to blame for these, but who knows? How many alien races are there? Why were some of them imitating human concepts and trying to blend in and others just doing whatever the fuck they wanted? Why were some invisible at first? And don't even get me going on the Gantz games themselves, like if humans were behind the games, why did they have all these limiting rules about the weapons and revivals? Of course, you could say they only wanted the cream of the crop, fair. But more so once the invasion began, why were they still enforcing those rules at that point? Wouldn't it be smarter to just let them do what they needed to help fight these aliens, bring back all kinds of people? And speaking of that, how did newly dead people just transport to the game without any prior scanning or anything? Bomb in head, ready to go. And it's also said that rich humans gambled on these games, so was it all just for training? Why and how did the apartment become unleavable and unbreakable when the games began? But that switch just flipped when the game is over. Did the spear do that? The dude inside of Gantz, who was revealed to just be some human replication made by that god race, why was he so friendly to the players and helpful against the company running Gantz when the shit popped off? But his creators seem to not really cared if the humans actually lived or died and only wanted to supply tools. You could say that they wanted humanity to win. They do say that despite hating humans, they needed to survive in order to keep an order in the galaxy. But then, why did they make it so restrictive and under the control of these human assholes during the war? Why not take it back from them? You can pick small details out and assume answers from them, which is what I did for the most part. But there's just large aspects left in the dust. And honestly, I didn't really mind it. It's not that hard to accept that in this insane galaxy-level battle for Earth against tons of aliens, that sometimes shit in this world is just weird and unexplainable. The final art can be criticized for a lot of things, sure, but I honestly felt like it was the natural endpoint for this over-the-top story, and also for Kei both as a character and as a human. Like, he fought, died, and fought again for the happiness he's finally found in his shitty life. Just wanting to stay side by side with the girl he loves as the world around him is full of weird, unexplainable shit and starts to fall apart. Kei fucking sucks. He's an asshole and he's hella unlikable. And by the end of Gantz, he became one of my new favorite protagonists. The shit kid who grew far past his own ways and decided he could sacrifice it all, himself included, for his cool-ass girlfriend. While making this video, I was cutting out panels from the last few chapters and it really just kinda reminded me how much I love the end. Kurono fighting against these insane odds one last time. A dude who I came to love, and along with me cheering, is literally the entire world. This piece of shit is a global hero, and after how hard he's fought and how far he came, seeing the literal Earth cheer for him feels like such a hard-earned reward. And man, abrupt ending aside, Kei being able to come home to his girl with the world safely secured is the perfect bow on this series that's been a brutally wild ride from chapter 1 to the finish line. Also, I wanted to put this somewhere. Muscle Man Rider aka Kaze is the actual best character because dude just walked over from Tekken and whipped ass. And his lone wolf and cub Dororo ass relationship with Takeshi is one of the best parts of the series. Like, tell me this kid using his moves wasn't the hardest you've ever popped off. That's my fucking boy. Is Gantz perfect? Nah, not at all. But I don't think I could give it less than a 9 out of 10 personally. This Reddit post here has lived in my mind for months now because it's probably the realest summary of Gantz there is. Fuck this whole video, this post sums it up in 5 sentences. Busted ass peak fiction, baby. So before I dip out of here, there's the final questions of how to read Gantz, should you watch the anime or the movies, how are the spin-off manga, and what's Oku been up to lately? Well, as to that last one, he's just chilling right now, shit posting on Twitter and being himself. Since Gantz has ended, he's released 2 major series, one being Inuyashiki and the other being Gigant. As of now, I finally have all of the volumes of each and plan to read them soon, and I want to also mention this too. There's a manga running currently called Thunder 3, a series with a cartoonish gag comedy art style until the main characters travel into another universe where it's basically just Gantz, art style shift and all. It's created by someone named Yuki Ikeda, and you can't find anything about them online at all. And this art is so distinct that a lot of people think this may either be Oku in disguise, or some kind of assistant collab project he's involved with. I have no clue myself and there's no proof of this anywhere, but this is really cool to me and it's honestly very believable. Like, look at these designs, it's kind of there. So I thought it was worth mentioning here, even if it ends up being wrong and dates this entire video incorrectly. Now, when it comes to reading the main manga itself, there have been 2 English prints both done by Dark Horse. One being just the single volumes that are almost identical to their Japanese versions, and then the recent Omnibus 3-in-1 re-releases. Now, real shit, I read most of this series in the new reprint omnibuses, and in terms of the translation and quality of the manga itself, I really like it. Think it has the right amount of edgy punch in the dialogue and overall great lettering on the effects. But when it comes to the omnibuses themselves, they kinda aren't the best things ever. They're the same length as a basic volume, so fairly handheld, but then stretched out 3 times to make a chunky short bitch that almost always had cut off panels from bad page management, and unfortunately, the actual single volume prints cost more than a trip to the hospital for a broken limb in America, so getting that full set can just bankrupt you. So this is a pretty last minute edit, but originally there was a whole bit here about how the omnibuses were unfortunately the only way to actually own the series retail price anymore. Then a few weeks back, Oku himself just tweets, yeah, apparently Dark Horse is making a deluxe edition of Gantz, I guess. To which I was one of the first people to quote tweet it, just yelling, yo! And he liked it and proceeded to post and interact with other fans about the subject, so to me, it's basically confirmed. Now realistically, it would be just like the big Berserk, Hellsing, Blade of the Immortal, and the recently announced Trigun editions, you know, the big leather fuckers. Not really much else to say at this point, but hey, that may be a thing, so figured I'd throw it in. And after that, as for the 2004 anime done by Studio Gonzo, I think it's fairly solid for what they had to work with at the time. Now, I talked about Gonzo in my Hellsing video, as they were the studio behind the 2001 Hellsing anime, but there was another wrinkle in this anime's production that I thought was worth mentioning up front. Most interestingly, the anime's main director was a man named Ichiro Watano, who, if you're a big animation buff out there, that name may ring a loud-ass bell, as he was a long-time legend in the game. Starting out in the early 80s with series like Gundam, Ideon, and Macross, Itano became well known across the field for his Itano Circus, a style of action scene that he was able to produce that was so unique to him. That being exactly what you're seeing now, whenever a mech, a ship, someone's rocket arm blasts, has those insane, acrobatic, and all-around hectic missile salvos, smoke lines trailing everywhere in the sky as the targets scramble to evade or explode in the fire. This style would go on to be replicated and referenced in tons of anime, video games, all kinds of shit. And strangely enough, the man who is at the foundation of all of that is here now directing Gantz, which, knowing the legacy he had and looking what we got from this, seemed like a bit of a downgrade. I do think the general vibe of the anime is correct. It's dark, edgy, and brooding just like the manga. Characters are mean-spirited and shitty as usual, with extra scenes added in to really hammer that fact home. It's also exceptionally gory, heads popping and disembowelments happening on a frequent basis, as these early missions usually had most of the cast in situations they stood no chance in, and I'm really glad they got to keep that energy because it's just not Gantz without it. And just like the gore, it's also not Gantz unless you have excessive nudity, which hey, they got that in too. Can't show that here because duh, but there's tits and ass in like every episode, so that was correct at least. At the time of its release, the manga was wrapping up the 3rd mission, the Statue Rumble, and the anime had fairly faithfully adapted the story up to that point. But once the anime had covered all of the manga's current material, they were forced to make a final filler mission where K is the target. And it's honestly not great. The final villain just literally being some dude, the filler ending itself being god-awful and making like no sense, even if there wasn't really any sense to make of Gantz itself yet. Like because of a one-off line in the first chapter about that old lady Kurono shits on at the start, the anime uses her over and over like she's supposed to be some red herring or important player, and that shit was just kinda silly. Altogether, those story issues are just random unfortunate problems with the anime, and it's not even totally the anime's fault. Some of the best and most famous stuff in Gantz is after these missions, after the anime had well released and there was likely no hope for a new adaptation. So anime-only fans were left with a cruel-ass story that had no real resolutions or any growth for the main character over its 26 episodes. And aside from those story changes, the anime as a whole was just kinda weak. Gantz's main strength is its no-nonsense pacing and action. It doesn't waste any time. The story stays moving, the drama stays enticing, and there's always more action around the corner. But in the anime, there's whole ass episodes where it feels like only a single chapter or two was really covered, the amount of downtime feeling way more stretched out and slow. And when the action was moving, despite some cool shots occasionally, most of the combat was very stilted and choppy at times. The animation itself is kind of rough, and it really showed during those fights. You can disguise still frames in normal settings with dialogue, but in combat it's way more noticeable. I do think the use of CGI in the anime was a mixed bag as well, the tools themselves still going through tons of growing pains and leading to some awful textures, but honestly, I respect the effort because it was totally in line with what Gantz was, so I do get it. The use of 3D swooping shots was creative a lot of the time, and I enjoyed tons of those. And you can't get this in 2004 without 3D, so win some, lose some, I guess. Oh, has a really good OST as well. Obviously, I used some of those tracks in this video. Just like Hellsing 2001, it has songs with lyrics in the background, which instantly makes me give your anime like 2 more points. Come on, give me more real-ass songs with lyrics to get hype with. Why do you think Libra Me from Hell or Ajin stopping Ichigo's sword and #1 cutting out is so iconic? That shit makes everything instant peak. There's also Gantz 0, or is it Gantz O because Osaka? Gantz 0, O, whatever, and 3 live action movies. Which I'll be real, for the live action, I only watched the first one and it was fine. Nothing I'd ever watch again, and in fact a lot of it was kinda goofy. And having seen a few clips of the other 2-part live action movies that apparently feature a whole new cast of characters and story, they both look fine overall, but I'm good. As for 0/O, that shit was a hella fun ride. The movie is just a loose but full adaptation of the Osaka arc, with some of the plot and characters changing to fit the hour and 40 runtime and to feel a bit easier for new viewers to understand. It's completely done in CG, made by Digital Frontier, and it looks absolutely fantastic, but most importantly, feels like Gantz from top to bottom. It's a perfect example of the actual triumph that CGI can be in anime, and it fits so well for Gantz specifically for the obvious CG reasons. The effects on suits and weapons, the sounds all of the tech made, the level of detail on the characters, the overall violence and intensity of the battles. This one super fucking cool shot from Kato's perspective that shows what it's actually like to be Gantz transported. It all feels so natural and fitting. The guns all look so in-depth and methodical, which matches the energy of the manga. It's just great. Only real knock I have against it, the ending scenes show that at some point Kaze and Takeshi were involved but aren't in the movie, and goddammit, that's a fucking crime. But if you want a small taste of what Gantz is like, it's the perfect place to kinda just jump in and see what it's all about. Even if the arc in the manga goes way harder with how fucked up the Osaka team can be, and the overall nightmare that the night itself is. Need a whole anime reboot in this style, that shit would be rad. There's also been mentions of a big Hollywood adaptation that was teased with the Gantz X project on a now defunct website, but in 2021, Oku himself said it wasn't happening anymore. Then a few months later, it was announced that it was happening and Oku wasn't involved, and since then it's just been totally silent, so sure I guess, probably best it never happens, but who knows. And lastly, we can't forget about Gantz G and E, the 2 spin-off manga. Gantz G, which I guess stands for Gantz Girls because it's a mostly all-girl cast, follows Kei Corona in what seems to be an alternate reality version of Gantz, but also not maybe. Her school bus crashing with a group of high school students in it and them all entering the games. It's only 3 total volumes, with the first one being a single mission, the second being a look into the lives of the girls, and the final being one more mission. As a spin-off story, it's totally fine, I guess. Like, there's nothing honestly too special here in terms of the plot that really elevates it to being something you need to seek out. And past the plot being basic, the art is a massive step down from Oku's original work. Like, no shade to Keita Izuka, the person who actually did it. Looking online and from a few shots in G, you can tell that they have talent. But the rougher use of CGI and the flatter character designs really take its toll when directly compared to a basic chapter in Gantz. So between the lackluster art and a fine plot, G is skippable in my opinion, but on the flip side, running right now in Weekly Young Jump is Gantz E, the second spin-off that takes place in Edo, Japan hundreds of years ago, and is a perfect spin-off for what Gantz is. Following the story of Hanabe, he accidentally dies along with a swordsman from the woods, them diving into a river to save someone else's life, just like Kei and Kato at the start of the main series. And just like that beginning, they wake up in a room with unfamiliar people and a black orb in the center, it eventually opening up and giving out the usual gun, suits, and target orders for the round, before as usual, starting the transfer and sending the new participants out to fight crows in traditional Japanese armor. As of writing this, the story is still going and the explanations for why there's an ancient Gantz are still a mystery and honestly probably always will be, so I don't want to dive too much into it. But in terms of the art and presentation in E, it is absolutely on the same level of quality that I would say is in the main series. The amazing detail of the outfits, the expressions in the faces, the killer use of CGI and full page spreads being taken advantage of, the second-to-second combat that feels so high stakes. E is exactly what it should be, a perfect extension of the main series. And with just under 50 chapters at this time, it's super worth the read. Oh, and one more thing. There's also a Gantz PS2 game that only covers the first few missions. It kinda plays like an old-ass 3D brawler, and it has about the same level of quality as Final Fight Streetwise, which is not a compliment. Between these missions, it has like these virtual novel scenes that tell the basic framework of the early manga, and it seems like it's honestly pretty short. It was probably just an anime cash-in to make a quick buck, but Oku himself said he really wanted a Gantz video game, so hey man, right on, he got it. OST whip shit though, been using it the whole video. All of this has been basically to say, despite having tons of issues from the plot itself to the content in the story, the apparently divisive use of CGI, the extremely disliked ending, and the way Oku handled all kinds of things, Gantz still fucking rules, dude. It's completely unapologetic in what it is, and while that's not always a good thing, it's for sure pure in what it wants to be and what it's trying to say. And if you can get past those compounding issues, there really is a core to the series that's something incredibly special and unlike anything else. I wouldn't say Kei's struggle is like my own because, no. But I understand the dude. Despite being a total shitbag, he's relatable. And through the center message of growth and connection at the heart of it all, I really ended up adoring Kei and the entire ride that Gantz was. And I hope that you can find that love in it too. Thanks for watching. I wanted to talk more about Inuyashiki and Gigant, but they would take a lot more time and maybe even deserve their own videos. Anyway, hit all that shit below, comment, like, sub, Patreon, all that good stuff. Wanted to have this out faster, but I blitzed Skyward Sword while waiting for Tears of the Kingdom, and then that happened, and man, video games still rule. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. See you next time with whatever's next. Have a feeling it'll be a bit electric.